Is it time to do podcast intro or whatever?
Yes, but first, listen to me drink water.
That's staying in. That's definitely staying in.
Okay. All right.
What's up, guys, and welcome to the Dancing for Architecture podcast, where we listen to music and we talk about it.
Yep. That's what we do.
Yep. So today we have our first listener requested album, which is funny because the podcast isn't even out yet, and we already have an album that has been recommended to us. So the album that we're listening today is Song for America by Kansas.
Yes, and it is a prog rock album, and it
Mm.
came out in 1975. And I knew about Kansas before, but I didn't really listen to them except for their most popular stuff, like "Dust in the Wind" and stuff off their other albums. But this as a project, oof, it surprised me. It was really good. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, I grew up not really having a whole lot of exposure to Kansas. Like, I had like a greatest hits album by them that I listened to, and the title track for this album was on there. So going in, I had a little bit of an expectation of what this album was going to be like. But oh my goodness, like the more that I've listened to this record, the more I've just grown to appreciate a lot of the overall instrumentation and a lot of the construction that just went into everything. And just like in true prog rock fashion, it's just so natural the way that they do all of these super advanced concepts. So I'm super excited to just get into it. So, but before we get into that, let's take a second to quick talk about our link of the day.
Oh man, that link of the day. It is. I'm not gonna say what it is, but it's in the liner notes or whatever you call them, the show notes. Uh, it's something. It's really something.
Yeah, honestly, some of my favorite production on a project like that. Like I feel like a lot of stuff like that just kind of pops up onto YouTube, but like that's just a certified hood classic right there.
Yeah, I mean, 10 out of 10. Recommend putting it on your
Yeah.
playlist. It's on Spotify. All right.
Oh yeah, I forget it's on Spotify. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm adding that today.
Yes. All right. So let's just kind of talk about first off, what are kind of the overall strengths you see with the album as a whole? Like overall.
Strengths. Like I would say the instrumentation is just amazing. The well, not programming because they're real, but the drumming is just amazing.
Yeah.
The violins, like I did not expect for the strings to be so prominent in that way, but the violins, the lyrics are also very great for each. The concepts are great. But what do you think? Strength.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with everything you said. As a drummer myself, like with the little bit of Kansas that I did listen to growing up, like this dude was this dude is up there as like one of my favorites. Even as a kid, I was just like, yo, this joint slaps. Like just kind of listening to the way that he holds everything together, especially throughout the changing time signatures. And this is something we'll get into on individual tracks, but the way that they make these super duper odd time signatures sound so natural is just incredible. Like I remember one song, we'll get to there eventually, but one song is in 11 and
Oh
I didn't
yeah.
notice it while I was actually thinking about it. It's
Yeah.
just immaculate.
Yeah, I don't think they stay in one time signature or meter the whole on any of the songs for the whole song. So it's really
No, they
interesting.
don't. It's really really cool. Yeah. So I don't know if we each wanted to talk about our favorite track for the album. I think mine is probably the title track. I think partially because I'm the most familiar with it. That like on this most recent listen through of the album when we were listening to it for the project, I just kind of grasped onto that and I was just like noticing a lot of the intricacies of the construction of the track as a whole that I really didn't notice before when I was listening to it as a kid. So I think that's probably my favorite track for that reason.
Yeah, I'd say Song for America is definitely a standout for me, but surprisingly on a second listen, The Devil Game really just stuck with me for some reason. So I'd say that one is
Do
definitely,
you think that's the certified thick groove of
yes,
the record?
that's the thick groove for the day.
Yeah, I definitely tend to agree. I was between that and Down the Road for the thick groove, but we can talk a little bit more about that when we get there. But let's just kind of go track by track and let's just jump on into it.
Yeah. So
All right.
down the road.
All right. So this first track is just like I think one of the cool things that this record that you can hear is you can really hear a lot of Led Zeppelin influence, and I think that this is really obvious on both Devil Game and this track right here. I think especially with the vocals style, but we still get this absolutely amazing. I think it's a fiddle solo, and it's just like absolutely
Oh
crazy.
yeah.
I think it's just like it starts out when you're just like expecting just a normal rock track, and then like here and there you'll get like these little rhythmic breaks where it's just like dat 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 dat, and then it's boo dat 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 or something like that, and it's just like it's totally ridiculous. Like I was just like the first time I heard that, I'm like I did not expect that at all. Um, and then the kind of the section where the lead singer is singing along with the violin
Mm-hmm.
over the like really sparse instrumental, that was so cool. Like I think that's probably top, like that's one of my favorite moments on the whole album. Like it's just so cool.
Yeah, definitely the groove of it is like a foot tapper. It's like like you're just like, oh, okay. This thing is, and then with the lyrics, they blend in very well with it. I don't know what it's talking about, but I was just, bobbing my head the whole time. But something that stood out for me is like the tag guitar solos. So like one person would play a guitar solo on the left, and then on the right they would respond with like it was kind of like a competition type thing, and that was really cool to me how it was like right left, and even with the violins came in and were blending and soloing and all that. So that was really really cool to me.
Yeah, this track was definitely a great track to start out the record. I think it did a very good job of like because I think progressive rock can be very hard to stomach at first because it's just so weird. But this first track just did such a great job of breaking you into that mold of the sort of weird instrumentation that they use and some of the weirder rhythms with the little breaks here and there. And just the overall construction of this track is really good. And I think it sets the tone for the record really well.
Yeah, it's not much else to be said about it. It's good
Yeah, just
intro.
kind of a jam. Yeah. But let's move on to the titular track of the album, Song for America, probably my favorite track on the album. And whoo boy, this is a doozy.
Yeah, it's definitely, I'd say it's the standout track of the album. Even though there are some bangers on here and it's only the second song, it's definitely the standout track. And I like the concept of it. So I was looking into the meaning of it, the lyrics, and it's about how America was beautiful before people got here. And at the beginning it's talking about, oh, there's just it's like a paradise and there's green pastures and all this. And then
Mhm.
like towards the second half after the vibe switches, then it's like, all right, and then all these crazy humans came and colonized or whatever, and now it's it's what it is today with skyscrapers, and it doesn't portray it as a bad thing. It's just like, change. So
Yeah, for sure. I definitely there's I'm gonna want to talk about that quite a bit actually when we get to the instrumentals, but let's just talk about the intro for a second. So I took the time to just sit down and figure out the chords for the intro because of all of the amount of modulation up that this thing
oh
does.
yeah,
I was just okay, let me just take a look at what this does. So you know how it repeats through that first section twice?
what the
With the da 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 da,
oh
and then
yeah
it
yeah
goes,
yeah.
and then it does. So it goes from the key of C to the key of E flat, and then it does this really crazy lift where it goes G minor C, A minor D, B minor E, A flat, B flat, and it modulates up an octave back to the key of C.
Oh my gosh.
In most circumstances, it does not make sense to say it modulates an octave, but here it makes total sense. And then when it goes back into that pattern again, you're up an octave, so the energy is already higher, and it's just kind of still building this sort of grandiose picture in your mind. And then when it gets back to that A flat, B flat, it doesn't stop at C. It goes A flat, B, C sharp, F. And then you end up in the key of F, and then it does some weird noodling to go between F and G. But then from there, it goes from I believe it goes from F, and you ultimately end up in the key of A. But it's just like this crazy journey all the way. Like you feel like you're just constantly rising, and the excitement's just constantly building. But then once you get to the sort of past all of the grandiose intro part, a lot of the instrumentation more drops out, and you get sort of an intro to the first vocal section, like the first verse of it or whatever.
Right.
And I think that's really cool because it's like they understand, okay, we can't really switch gears too much when we're going straight into the vocals. So they just kind of give you this really nice fiddle intro or violin intro. I don't know what you would call it. Like I've always like I feel like they're the same instrument, but I feel like it's more of a stylistic thing. Do you know?
I don't know. It's definitely stringed, but it sounds like a really high stringed instrument. But
Mm-hmm.
as for those modulations, those things were seamless though. Like it sounded like it was doing something, but if I didn't go out of my way to, look for it and transcribe it, I wouldn't have known that it was doing all that. But that's crazy to think about that it's complex, but it's easy to listen to at the same time. And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
This is again like one of the things of this album. It just makes all of these super advanced concepts, like advanced time signatures, all of this crazy modulation that they're doing. It's just so effortless. And I think there's a level of complexity that can be used to the benefit of the beauty of the music and having a purpose for it. And I think this album does that beautifully. And that can be seen with like even just this intro where you just see this really large journey to just get to the first verse. But we can just get going with the first verse. I absolutely love the melodies that they picked and just the overall instrumentation, where it's just kind of like this sort of peaceful kind of vibe that you get.
Yeah, I love when after all of that intro part, around 2:24 is when they start into that first vibe switch, and it brings like this organ, and then it brings in the bass and the piano. It's like really floaty and super serene, and then the strings come in, and then the drums come like it's, and then the lyrics obviously are really good too, but just that progression into something that's like triumphant, and then it's just like super seamless how they weave from vibe to vibe. But I want to highlight like this lyric that says no man rules this land, no human hand has soiled this paradise. And that's something that stood out. It was like, wow. And it even is highlighted in the instrumentation how it's like at the beginning it's super just, oh, we got just the piano and the bass, and we're just like floating and looking at the sun. And then the drums come in and the humans just crashing, wrecking ball bulldozer. That's what I imagined in my brain. But
Yeah, no,
yeah.
and that rhythm right there is just like a prog rock classic. That 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 pattern, where it's like no man rules this land, no human hand has soiled this paradise. Like you hear that all over progressive rock, and it's just like I'm a sucker for 10/8 time or whatever you would call that. Like I just think it's super sick. Um, but yeah, and then gets into the part where it just sort of starts grooving after that sort of chorus part, I guess you could call
Oh
it.
man, and that around 5:44 is when the polymeters with the piano, like, that was so clean to me when they just had that little motif. I don't remember how it goes, but it was just like the piano going under, and then they had more pianos in a different like meter. It was really weird, but like it was super groovy at the same time. And then the 9/8 groove, it was like like it was insane.
Yeah. Like when it's just like everything drops out and you just get the piano doing the really cool thing. so sick. And then it just drops out, and then you're back into 4/4, and I'm just like,
It was
okay,
like
like, and
it was the like it would just hop in. It was really cool.
yeah, and then from that you get this, like again, it hops back into this 4/4 idea, and I think that's a really cool thing where you just kind of have this chaotic, almost natural, like very wildlife feeling groove, and then you just drop back into 4/4, and you're just like, haha, we have man and society or whatever, and it's just like very almost industrial when you drop back into what's almost more normal. And so I think that that like little contrast that you get is really cool. And then what's really cool is that the instrumental cycles through the different patterns that the intro used, and like the different melodies and motifs that were going on there, and then it drops back into the first vocal
Right.
melody, and this is after all of this chaos in back into sort of this order, and then you get almost a triumphant like vocal pattern that's more about like people be
Right.
vibing.
And it's like it shows a story arc of okay, it was this normal and now it's this normal. And it doesn't portray it as okay, humans came in and ruined everything. It's just like, well, there weren't people there and now there are people and that's just how it is now. And that shows with
Yeah,
the motif coming back from the beginning.
yeah, and I really like the kind of overall instrumental that it ends on, like that kind of just outro bit. Like it just very much looks to the future in the way that it's written, and I think that's really cool.
For sure, for sure. But that leads
And
pretty well into Lamplight Symphony.
oh yeah, this is another favorite track of mine. I think this is probably my second favorite track on the
Bro,
record. Oh, that's
I
so
have
good.
so many notes of just like Sonic the Hedgehog boss level vibes. Like I
Oh my
got
god.
so many vibes of like, okay, I'm just playing Sonic and I'm fighting Eggman right now. And that's all I could think about for the first listen. And then the second, I was looking at the lyrics, but what'd you think of it?
Yeah, so overall, I think that story-wise, this one is probably, I personally like the story written for this song the best. Like it stood out to me the most. Like this idea of a man who's just like really sad because his wife's dead or
Hmm.
whatever. And like this just beautiful, heartbreaking, and like very surreal story of like he's gazing out, and then like whether it's like a vision or a hallucination or actually happened like a ghost or whatever, his wife comes back just for a second. And like that sort of idea, I think it's very much a reflection of his grief and him coming to accept sort of overall his grief and like his wife's death, and I think it's a really cool story.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of notes of the lyric saying, and though his life is empty, he pretends that she's still there. So I'm just imagining this guy is it says he's like out in the middle of the woods during the winter, and they paint some vivid imagery about, just the scene that's being set and how, he gets a light and he's, has a lamp going around his house and just looking at the past memories with his wife. And I think it's just super and it's all over just this triumphant beat with just crazy drums, and it's like, if I didn't look at the lyrics, I would just be like, like, but it's definitely super, super deep of a story and very interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting, the instrumental. I think a lot of what was really cool about it is when you first transitioned out of the vocals into the instrumental section, the vibes I got were sort of like a church organ, which was really cool. And then it shifted into this very much more mystical, kind of surreal, supernatural kind of like groove kind of
Mhm.
thing. And it just kept swapping back and forth between that really groovy bop and the just kind of more somber kind of sounding stuff.
Right, and that kinda the ending, though, was really weird to me, like, the very last chord, it ends on this weird unresolved chord, but I think it might represent the dissatisfactory end to life, like because at the end of the lyrics, it just talks about how he one day he'll join her or something and they'll be one, but this last chord is just like not sitting right, but it's not sitting right. It's just there. And so it's definitely a really interesting way of painting that emotion.
Yeah, that is for sure very, very good picture, very good imagery overall on this track. I think one of my favorite bits is like this is a very small thing, but the way that the melody ends on the chorus, they could have very easily made it a very standard melody, but it ends not on the one, I believe, and it ends in this very somber way where it just kind of like strikes this chord, and it's just like the chorus ends with this idea of like sort of this overall like sort of waiting anticipation kind of thing because it doesn't end in this very resolved way, and I think that that's a really cool picture that it
Right.
paints just the melody alone.
I concur. But that brings us into Lonely Street, which has this really bluesy vibe. It reminds me of when we listened to the Pink Floyd album, Dark Side of the Moon, the Money track. It reminds me of just like the bluesy, the bass line coming in, and it's just the bass and the vocals at the beginning. And it gives me like this bluesy, like he's just talking about his problems, because the whole premise of blues is that you have this one motif like dun, 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 and you're just talking about like, oh, my wife left me, or I'm just gonna die inside, and it's just like super sad stuff. And that's what this
Yeah,
this song is, just super weird and like gruesome and very weird, but I like the blues vibe of it.
yeah, no, and after just sitting down and counting it, this took me forever to figure out, but it's actually in 11 for the majority of the track.
Oh yeah, and I thought of it as like switching from 5/8 to 6/8, but I guess 11 makes a lot more sense because it repeats it. But yeah, it was a
Yeah.
really cool like dun 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 dun. Like I liked it.
Yeah, because it was like at first I was like trying to process it like, okay, they dropped a beat from what, and then they did a really weird thing like in the second part of that measure pattern. But I realized, oh wait, when I was just like counting, like I was just counting eighth notes, and I was like, okay, I'm feeling this out like as if I'm feeling the triplets of 12 to 8. And it was just like, oh, it just never leaves 11 unless except for when it gets to the chorus when it's in like 4, or 12 rather, but and it's just like I don't know, like it feels so natural. Like it doesn't feel like they were forcing that idea of 11. It felt like what was naturally intended for the writing of the song specifically. And I think this track, you can also see sort of the overall fluidity that they feel in every time signature. And I feel like with a lot of stuff in odd time signatures, it can be very easy to become restricted by said time signature and stick to one pattern. And but this feels as natural as if it was written in 4, and I think that that's super cool.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel like you're just being dropped into the next bar and it's like, okay, I'm confused. But I want to highlight just this really odd story. Like, he killed a guy on this lonely street where there's just a bunch of girls everywhere. And then he goes to jail, and then he shoots a guy in jail. I'm just like, what is happening while I'm listening to this just groovy blues? I'm like, this narrative is very interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, I never really listened a whole lot to the lyrics of this one. I was just like too busy grooving. Like I was vibing. Like I was just like, oh shoot. Like this joint kind of slap. Like I didn't really appreciate it a lot when I was just kind of passively listening to the album. But when I was just sat down and listened to it and I was just sitting counting measures and counting beats, I was just like, yo, this is
For
crazy.
real. And speaking of songs that I was not paying attention to the lyrics to, but groove, The Devil's Game. Oh man, this song does not stay in one time meter for the whole song. Well, none of them do, but it's
I could not figure this one
I
out,
could
man. I'll
not.
tell you.
Like, I was sitting here like, this grooves, but I don't know what's going on. And obviously he's like talking about the devil or something, but I don't know what he's talking about because I was grooving too hard. And then you got the guitar solos. This is definitely one of those like air drum, like, you're just in your house in your socks, like air drumming, air guitaring with like
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
imagine that because this was one of those. Like I just wanted to like throw my desk or something because I was just headbanging so hard. But yeah, what'd you think?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Like, it was just like I was just like listening to it, and I was just trying to figure out everything that was going on. And the track ended, and I realized, oh shoot, I didn't write down
Yeah, I had
any
to go
notes for this.
back.
And like, I think one of the coolest moments is where it just drops into four for like two or three measures is all. And it's just like I noticed that, and I was just like, ooh, this is just completely normal. And then it went back to being weird. But it was just like that really brief moment of like, I know exactly what's going on, and then knowing nothing about what's going on. And it's just overall just a really good track. Like, I think this is definitely the certified thick grove of the album
For real.
for
It's like the
sure.
savior of this album, to be honest.
Yes, as in the Jacob Collier track, not as in a
Yeah, I
literal
guess, yeah,
savior.
to specify. But I would definitely see them in concert for this song. Like if they only played this and left, like, yo, that would be hype.
The thing is this is one of their early albums, and they went on to do so much more crap that was just also so amazing. Like, I thought that one of my favorite songs by them was on this record because it had a similar vibe to Song for America, but that track actually wasn't on this record. It was on a record like 8 years later, and I was just like, hold up, what? I thought that this track was on this album, but it wasn't. And I was just like, okay, I clearly have to dig way deeper into this artist because their stuff is just so fire.
For real, for real. But yeah, this was just heavy vibes. But that takes us into Incomudro-Hymn to the Atman.
Yeah, I was just like, okay, what's this prog rock
Right.
title we got
This is
going?
a
I was just
very
like, what
prog
the
rock title, but at the beginning I just got this another game vibe. I'm like in an open world game, right? It's just like some medieval game, like maybe Dark Souls or something, or I don't know. I just got that vibe at the beginning, just initially off the bat. And this song is definitely like a free form structure. Like there's just no you'll be on one idea and then just on to the next. And what'd you think?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think it very well wraps up the album because, like, even though the record only has 6 tracks and this takes up 12 minutes of said record, like, I think it's like really cool because it feels like it kind of glosses over a lot of the general musical ideas going on and like construction ideas of tracks for the rest of the record. Like, you had one section where the production felt very similar to Lamplight Symphony, and then it a second later it feels more like Song for America, and I'm just like, you're hitting all these ideas, and then it just hits you with this drum solo, and I'm just like, where
Oh
did this
yeah,
come
the
from?
drum
And
solo is like it's literally like its own song. It starts out as a drum break and then it's just like okay, when is the song coming back? And he's just like we start off with these snare fills, just like the snare rolls going back and forth between your headphones, and then it's just like him going crazy on the drums and then stopping, coming back, starting a whole groove for like maybe 8, 16 bars, and then going back to just it's super free form, but it's very interesting to listen to.
yeah, and I think what the drum solo really does super well is when he starts like that speeding up section where it's like you get the rising synth behind him, where it's just you get that tone just kind of rising slowly behind him while he's just slowly getting like louder and quicker, and then it just drops right back into the first idea of the piece, and I'm just like, yo, what the heck just happened? I'm just like every time I hear that, I'm just like
Ye-
completely floored by that overall just kind of idea where it's just like you get back into the first section, but it doesn't feel like it's a forced transition. It more feels like it's like very
Right. And it's
seamless.
like we get at the beginning this crazy organ solo. We get this section that sounds like some arcade game. It sounds like Monkey Ball with like the synths. And then we get this section that sounds like Splatoon. It literally the synth sounds like like bro. I was like, this should be in Splatoon, no cap. But there was another
Yeah,
one that's like some Arabian Egyptian royalty type. Like, there's so many vibes in this song, and I'm just like, bro,
Yeah, for sure. I definitely did this track a little bit of a disservice by not taking nearly as many notes
for
down on it.
real.
Like I was just like listening to it and I'm just like there's just so much going on here and I think I wish that I was able to give this a very similar analysis to what I did for Song for America. But I think part of the reason that I was able to just kind of understand everything that was going on with Song for America is because I grew up listening to that track. And this one, like, still don't have those years of listening to it to really give me that experience. So it's like, I'm going to keep coming back to this record as a whole because, like, there's so much to chew on here. And it's like, if it's anything like Song for America was with me, it's just going to get better with every lesson. I'm just going to discover different connections that I didn't notice before. And you're just going to have all of these different cool things that you discover constantly the more
Yeah,
I
and
listen to
aside
it.
from all the craziness that's happening in the actual instrumental, the lyrics are super like existential and spiritual. They have a lot of Hinduistic themes in them, like about, inner self. I think Atman is like a thing in Hinduism about your inner core and like your being or something. So he's just talking about like some hippie type stuff, like we're gonna ascend it to this plane and we're growing old, but we're also going back to where we've been. I'm just like, whoa, my third eye is opening. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting thing. How much religion plays a big part in the lyrics of Kansas music because their main songwriter, Kerry Livgreen, he just kind of spent his entire life just kind of wandering, searching for a spiritual truth. Um, I don't know where he eventually ended up. I know like he ended up at Christianity at some point, but it's really interesting to just kind of hear all of these different existential ideas throughout the albums, but like even like throughout this record, and I think it's really cool. Um, I feel like overall you can just kind of see just sort of a picture of maybe America as a whole throughout. Like it's like Song for America and Other Stories is kind of I feel like what you could have also named this album, where you just have all of these different stories of things happening in America throughout the years. Um, but yeah, I feel like this as an album works really, really well. Like you have a pretty coherent sound across the board, but at the same time, you have so much going on. You have pretty good track to track transitions, but every track feels distinct. Like you have overall, like it's like even though you have longer tracks, they're still like super duper interesting all the way through. And I just think it just stands out really well as a well constructed album. And that's a lot of what I really like about progressive rock is across the board, it feels like progressive rock artists put pride in the album as an art as opposed to like, okay, we're gonna put out a single and then we're just gonna throw a bunch of other tracks onto this record and hope that people buy it.
yeah, for sure. I think they're also very intentional. Obviously, this isn't a concept album, but it's still really intentional in the way they approach the themes. And I just can't shake
Yeah.
the feeling of most of them just gave me game vibes. Like all I could think of is games that related. Even at the end of this final track, we get the Mario cadence, the flat six to flat seven to one, that bun, 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 like that cadence at the very end. And so I'm just
Yeah.
like, bro, this just solidifies my game idea of this album.
I did not know that that was called the
Yeah,
Mario
yeah, yeah, yeah.
cadence.
If you try it on your piano, just like do A flat to B flat to C, you'll immediately think like like
Oh my gosh. Real.
you know. But yeah,
Yeah. It's yeah, absolute banger of an album. I think for me it's like this is another album that I'm gonna have to go back and listen to more to really appreciate it because the other two albums that we've talked about on this podcast as of yet, I had some experience before we decided to listen to it for the podcast. And this
yeah,
one
I
I just
had
jumped
zero
into. Um
past anything with this album. I didn't hear any song off of this before today.
But yeah, absolute. It is a certified banger in my opinion. I think it definitely achieved what it set out to do. I feel like I definitely felt the very atmosphere they were trying to construct throughout the record. Um, it does kind of show its age a little bit, in my opinion. Like, it feels so terribly 70s, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just you look back at the 70s and you listen to this record and you feel a lot
Yeah,
of
and I
that
think
energy.
in order to really appreciate a lot that goes on in this, you have to be intentional about looking at what's in it. But if you just casually listen, like I listened to this for the first time while I was shoveling snow, and the things that stood out to me were the synth stuff, the drumming, and the the devil's game. But really, it's like if you sit down and look at the ones that aren't like super forefront, you still see some really cool stuff. So I'd say, like, for anyone listening to this, definitely give stuff a try that you're not super keen to, and look at what's going on that makes you like it or dislike it, and that'll definitely improve the way you listen to music. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. This was definitely a good exercise in listening to something different, even for me as someone who just likes progressive rock as a whole. Like, I'm of the mind that progressive rock isn't really a genre, but rather a philosophy for writing music. Um, that and this certainly cements this because this is way different than the album we listened to last podcast, and it's way different than anything by Rush, and it's way different than anything by like Frank Zappa, and just like there's just so much variety in the genre, or quote unquote genre, that is progressive rock. And so yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely going to be listening to this record again.
Well, that seems to be it, but check out our link of the day and come back for the next one. Yes, sir.
Oh
But
boy.
remember,
All right.
everyone that's listening to this, don't put the milk first.
My man's a spitting wisdom right there.